Imagine sitting alone in a concrete room somewhere beneath a government building in the early 1950s. No windows, no clock, no sense of time, only the hum of fluorescent lights above your head. You haven't slept properly in days. Your interrogators ask the same questions again and again. A doctor enters the room carrying a syringe. Another man watches silently from the corner taking notes. You are told the injection will help you remember. Instead, your thoughts begin slipping apart. Reality starts feeling unstable. Your memories no longer feel entirely yours. And somewhere behind the scenes, hidden beneath the layers of Cold War secrecy, intelligence officials are asking a terrifying question. Can the human mind be controlled? In the years after World War II, the United States became consumed by fear. Fear of Soviet infiltration, fear of communist expansion, fear that America's enemies had discovered psychological techniques capable of breaking human beings from the inside out. During the Korean War, captured American prisoners appeared in propaganda broadcasts denouncing the United States. To intelligence agencies, this is more than ordinary coercion. Many believed communist governments had unlocked something darker, something capable of reshaping thought itself. The media called it brainwashing. And behind closed doors, the CIA launched secret experiments to find out whether mind control was truly possible. Those experiments became known as Project Bluebird, and later, Project Artichoke. Programs so secretive that large portions of the records were later destroyed. Programs involving hypnosis, forced drug exposure, sensory deprivation, psychological torture, and attempts to manipulate memory, identity, and behavior. Long before MKUltra became infamous, Bluebird and Artichoke were already pushing the limits of human experimentation. Tonight, we're going deep into the origins of the CIA's first mind control programs, the experiments, the victims, the paranoia, and the chilling legacy they left behind. Because the most disturbing part of the story is that it really happened. To understand Bluebird and Artichoke, you have to understand the psychological atmosphere of the early Cold War. After World War II ended in 1945, the lines between the United States and the Soviet Union collapsed almost immediately. Both nations entered a shadow war fought through espionage, propaganda, and intelligence operations. Nuclear weapons had already changed warfare forever, but American intelligence officials feared an even more dangerous battlefield was emerging: the human mind itself. Reports from China and the Soviet Union described prisoners undergoing intense psychological conditioning. Captured American soldiers returning from Korea appeared emotionally broken. Some publicly criticized the United States, others signed confessions. Some cooperated with enemy broadcasts. To intelligence agencies, this was deeply alarming, and because very little was understood about psychology at the time, rumors spread rapidly. Could communist governments actually erase loyalty? Could memories be manipulated? Could someone be programmed like a machine? In 1950, CIA Director Roscoe Hillenkoetter reportedly warned that the Soviet Union was investing heavily in psychological warfare. American officials feared the US was already behind. Historian Alfred McCoy later described this era as a period where intelligence agencies became obsessed with coercive persuasion. The CIA did not want to merely defend against these methods, they wanted to master them, and from that paranoia emerged Project Bluebird. In 1950, the CIA officially launched Project Bluebird. On paper, Bluebird appeared defensive. Its stated purpose was to study how American personnel could resist hostile interrogation. But internally, the project rapidly evolved into something much more disturbing. Bluebird researchers explored whether drugs, hypnosis, trauma, and psychological stress could be used to control human behavior. One surviving CIA memorandum outlined objectives involving special interrogation techniques, increased suggestibility, and control of individuals. The language was clinical, but the implications were horrifying. The CIA became fascinated with hypnosis. At the time, hypnosis occupied a strange place between legitimate psychology and pseudoscience. Some intelligence officials believed hypnosis could unlock hidden memories or force subjects to reveal secrets. Others wondered if post-hypnotic suggestions could compel people to carry out actions unconsciously. Researchers explored whether subjects could be instructed under hypnosis, then later activated through verbal triggers. One CIA document reportedly asked whether a hypnotized individual could be made to perform acts against his moral principles. That single line will later fuel decades of speculation about mind-controlled assassins. But Bluebird extended beyond hypnosis. The agency also began experimenting with narcotics and chemical interrogation. Morphine, barbiturates, amphetamines, and sedatives, and combinations of multiple drugs. One particularly disturbing concept involved forced addiction. Researchers theorized that if subjects became chemically dependent, they could be manipulated more easily during withdrawal. Imagine the psychological state of a person trapped in withdrawal symptoms while under interrogation. Vomiting, hallucinations, panic, physical agony, confusion. The CIA believed this vulnerability might weaken resistance. Many experiments were primitive and scientifically unreliable, but that did not stop them. The Cold War created an environment where fear often outweighed ethics, and Bluebird was only the beginning. In August 1951, Project Bluebird was renamed and expanded into Project Artichoke. The new name sounded harmless, almost absurd, but behind it was one of the CIA's most disturbing research operations. Artichoke transformed scattered experimentation into a broader, coordinated effort involving doctors, psychologists, chemical researchers, and intelligence officers. The agency now pursued a chilling objective. Could human beings be psychologically dismantled and rebuilt? Artichoke explored hypnosis, narcotics, electroshock concepts, sensory deprivation, and psychedelic substances. Among the drugs studied was LSD. At the time, LSD was still largely unknown. The CIA believed it might function as truth serum, confusion agent, or even a weapon capable of destabilizing enemy agents psychologically. The agency's fascination with LSD bordered on obsession. Some researchers believed the drug temporarily dissolved psychological defenses. Others thought it could induce paranoia, fear, or compliance. The experiments quickly became ethically catastrophic. Many subjects reported did not fully understand what they were being exposed to. Some may have not consented at all. And because records remain incomplete, historians still debate the full scale of the experiments. One of the most infamous surviving Artichoke memos asked, "Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation?" Many details about Artichoke's experiments remain uncertain because records were deliberately destroyed decades later, but surviving documents paint a disturbing picture. Some experiments allegedly involved foreign prisoners held in covert facilities overseas. Others involved psychiatric patients or vulnerable individuals. Researchers experimented with combinations of sleep deprivation, hypnosis, drug exposure, sensory isolation, and prolonged interrogation. Imagine being isolated for days in a small town with no natural light, no human interaction beyond interrogators, no consistent sleep, no reliable sense of time. Your psychological state begins deteriorating rapidly, and then under those conditions, chemicals are then introduced into your body. LSD, sedatives, stimulants. The boundary between reality and hallucinations begin collapsing. Researchers monitored reactions carefully, not to help subjects recover, but to study how far the human mind could bend before breaking. Former CIA officer Victor Machete later described parts of the agency's behavioral research culture as deeply reckless and driven by paranoia. Historian John Marks, who investigated CIA mind control programs extensively, argued that many experiments operated with almost no meaningful oversight. And because the Cold War mentality framed everything as national survival, ethical concerns were repeatedly ignored. The CIA feared Soviet intelligence might already possess superior techniques, so the pressure to continue intensified. This became one of the central psychological engines behind Artichoke, fear justifying escalation. Chapter 5: Testimonials, Survivors, and Investigations. For decades, Bluebird and Artichoke remained buried beneath layers of secrecy. Then, in the 1970s, everything began unraveling. Public distrust of intelligence agencies exploded after Watergate. Congress launched investigations into CIA misconduct, and during those investigations, evidence of secret behavioral experiments surfaced. The Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission uncovered fragments of the CIA's mind control research programs. Journalists began tracing declassified documents, historians pieced together timelines, former officials slowly began speaking. One of the most significant investigators was journalist John Marks, whose book, The Research for the Manchurian Candidate, exposed many details surrounding CIA behavioral experimentation. Marks discovered that in 1973, then CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of many MK-Ultra related files, but some financial records survived by accident. Without those surviving documents, a large portion of the story would have disappeared forever. Former subjects and witnesses later described severe psychological trauma associated with CIA experimentation. An army scientist named Frank Olson became one of the most infamous connected cases after being unknowingly dosed with LSD during CIA experiments before his mysterious death in 1953. Although Olson is more directly tied to later MK-Ultra activities, his story reflected the dangerous culture that Bluebird and Artichoke helped create. A culture where secrecy overpowered accountability, and where human beings became experimental material. Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke never achieved the fantasy of total mind control. There is no evidence the CIA created perfect hypnotized assassins or programmable sleeper agents, but in many ways, the truth is more disturbing. The CIA genuinely tried. They explored psychological manipulation seriously enough to conduct real-world experimentation on vulnerable people, and these people fundamentally shaped the future of covert behavioral research. Artichoke eventually evolved into MKUltra in 1953 under CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb. MKUltra would expand experimentation dramatically across universities, hospitals, prisons, and covert safe houses. But Bluebirds and Artichoke created the foundation. They normalized secret experimentation, they institutionalized behavioral manipulation research, and they revealed how fear can erode ethical boundaries inside powerful institutions. Perhaps the scariest part of the story is not whether the experiment succeeded, it's that intelligence agencies believed the possibility alone justified crossing lines that should have never been crossed. Today, Bluebird and Artichoke exist somewhere between documented history and historical shadow. Many records remain classified, others were destroyed forever, what survives is fragmented. Declassified memoranda, partial testimonies, financial records, and unanswered questions. But even the surviving evidence reveals something chilling. During the Cold War, the United States government secretly explored whether memory, loyalty, identity, and behavior itself could be manipulated through science, drugs, trauma, and psychological pressure. Not because they had mastered mind control, but because they were terrified someone else might. And in that fear, they opened the door to some of the most controversial experiments in CIA history. Experiments whose consequences still echo decades later. Because once government begins searching for ways to control the human mind, where exactly does the limit stop?